Hello retro gamers and welcome to another video where I fix something. Today we have this Game Boy Advance that will not turn on at all. I found this on eBay for $15, which is a pretty decent price considering its excellent cosmetic condition, since a working model on the very same website goes for between $45 and $50. I'm getting close to owning every single Game Boy, and the Game Boy Advance was one of the last ones. Funnily enough, I've never owned one. I do have an SP, however. So as you can see, it is in pretty decent cosmetic condition, but plonking some batteries in, you can see it doesn't turn on at all. Unfortunately, I did not have a power supply to test it that way. Didn't really come out in the video footage here, I'm sort of still getting used to this new camera, but there is a bit of battery corrosion on the battery contacts, so that will be a good place to start. Disassembling the Game Boy Advance is quite easy, however you do need a tri-wing screwdriver, which is a proprietary screw head of sorts. The screwdrivers are quite easy to find. I think I bought mine on Handheld Hero for a couple of dollars back in the day, however you can find these on eBay or Amazon or whatever. But basically there is a bunch of those to take out around the back, but inside the battery housing there is another screw that is just a standard Phillip head screw, so you can just use a normal screwdriver to remove that. With those screws removed, the back side of the casing will simply come off, and here there will be two bumpers on either side as well as the back triggers. The bumpers, well I guess they're not really bumpers, they're just bits of plastic really, but they just come right out, there's nothing holding those in. And the triggers will just come out in a horizontal direction, but be careful, there is a bit of metal sticking out, so don't try to yank them upwards or anything like that. And to see with the back cover removed, we get a bit of a better look at the corrosion on the contacts. There isn't too much, not enough to make the unit not switch on I would think, but obviously we're going to clean it anyway. So the tools of the trade are quite simple for this repair. First off, we need white vinegar, preferably distilled, as well as isopropyl alcohol. The higher alcohol percentage, the better. And straight up I use the vinegar to clean off the corrosion on the battery contacts. Vinegar is a lot better for this than alcohol in my previous experience anyway. Just using something like a toothbrush, it has no problems whatsoever removing the corrosion. And then after that I sprayed some of the alcohol into the switch and then moved the switch back and forward quite a lot of times. Apparently it gets quite gunked up in there full of who knows what, so spraying in the isopropyl and turning it on and off quite rapidly appears to have worked for many people, which I found when I was doing research for this online. So doing those two things seems to have fixed many people's Game Boy Advances from what I've read on the internet. So from here I eagerly reassembled it and yeah, it didn't work. It still doesn't turn on. So pulling it apart again, I had a bit of a closer look across the motherboard and saw that there was a bit of corrosion on the contacts leading up to the switch. So doing the same thing, I just simply sprayed the isopropyl alcohol onto that and then gave it a bit of a scrub with the brush. And I thought while I was at it, I may as well give the rest of that side of the board a bit of a scrub down while it was there and available. However, as I went over those numbers there, I think it must be a serial number, the isopropyl alcohol actually rubbed it away. So that was a bit of a whoopsie, but I guess it's not a huge deal because you can't really see it. Even with the opaque casing, it's not a big deal. Another thing I found through my rigorous research is that sometimes the fuse could blow. The fuse is actually an SMD component, so I was quite hopeful that that wasn't the case for me, because I don't know if you've ever tried to replace an SMD component without the proper hardware, but it is absolutely nigh on impossible. Anyway, I tested it using the continuity mode with my multimeter, and happily I received continuity, so luckily it was not the fuse that was the problem. And after doing all that, hey, what do you know? The thing now turns on, as indicated by this very positive green LED. However, there was no image on the screen at all, let alone any audio. Messing around with the volume knob, I did notice there was a bit of a bonk sort of sound when I turned the console on. This happens with my Game Boy Color as well, so I think that's quite standard to have a bit of a buzz. So it led me to believe that there wasn't actually anything wrong with the speaker, as there was a bit of feedback when I turned the console on. This was further proved by plugging some headphones in, and I heard exactly the same thing. I didn't hear any sound from the startup sequence or the game, so that was not very promising. But it was good to know that at the very least the speaker wasn't broken as well, because then I would have to order in a new part and basically wait to finish repairing this console. So obviously at this point I was faced with a bit of a weird problem since I had power but there wasn't any video or audio. So it was starting to indicate that there was a bit of a logic problem, and that scares me. So just to make sure that I wasn't going crazy, I did grab the game and whack it into my Game Boy Advance SP because I know that works. I thought I knew that the game works, but yeah, plugging into the SP proved that the game in fact did work. So it wasn't the game that's the problem here, it was the Game Boy Advance. So knowing that, we could continue. So the next obvious place to start looking for the problem was, of course, the screen, forgetting about the whole fact that the audio wasn't working either. But regardless, it was worth a look. So the screen is actually attached to the major MOBO by this ribbon cable. The ribbon cable was removed by pushing these two tabs out on either side of the connector slot, and then the ribbon cable should just easily come out. Obviously you don't want to force this, you don't want to break the ribbon cable because obviously once you break that, you're screwed. So very much the same as before, I pulled it out and then I gave it a bit of a scrub with the brush and the isopropyl alcohol. Unfortunately, this didn't achieve anything new, so I opened it up again and decided to remove the MOBO and have a closer look at the screen module itself. So again, I had to remove the ribbon cable, but first there is a screw holding the MOBO to the outer casing of the Game Boy Advance. In teardowns that I'd found online, they actually showed that there were 3 screws holding the MOBO to the casing, so I don't know why mine only had 1. Maybe someone's been in here before and didn't fully replace the screws, I don't know, who knows. So with the main board removed, I could then also remove the buttons, and my god, these were filthy. Easily the grossest and filthiest components of this entire Game Boy Advance, which overall was in pretty good condition. I'm going to take a bit of a hit here because I didn't really do too much research in disassembling up until this point. So I figured that soft material over the screen had to be removed as well. This is not actually the case. The entire screen does just, you can sort of just pry it out of the casing, but I don't know, I got a spudger and started chipping away at it. This ultimately ended up being for some good because then I could have a look at the ribbon cable and see that it wasn't damaged. But yeah, you see me doing it here, it's totally unnecessary. But anyway, I did end up pulling the screen out like you're supposed to, and I removed that soft covering as well. But having a look at all the traces underneath, everything looked fine. I couldn't see any damage to the screen module whatsoever. So at this point I was getting a little bit desperate because I didn't really know what was wrong, and all the Googling in the world didn't turn up anything substantial of the same problem. I couldn't really find any other like forum posts or anything like that from someone asking for help with the same problem. So really, without knowing what else to do, I just gave the entire board a scrub again with isopropyl alcohol, but then also did the other side as well. This didn't achieve anything, it still didn't work, so I sat on it for a night. Coming fresh and new the next day, I did ask around the internet a little bit, and someone suggested that I give the whole board a going over with vinegar as well. So I did exactly that. There wasn't too much corrosion on the board. I mean, I couldn't really see much, there was a little bit. However, after I finished doing that and I let it dry for a bit, I put it all back together, and what do you know? The thing turns on. I get the boot sequence, I get the game playing, I get the audio, I get everything. The thing now completely works. So obviously there was a bit of corrosion on a trace somewhere that was causing a short or something like that. I guess I'll never know what the problem was exactly, but ultimately it doesn't matter. I'm happy that it's now working. Also, I should add that for these next couple of shots, I was very, very silly and forgot to turn on my microphone. So there is no audio here, but you just have to believe me for at least the next 20 seconds until I show you a clip that does have audio, that the volume was working on the Game Boy Advance. So with the system now in working order, it was now time to give the whole thing a good clean. Now, for this project, I just used the brush and isopropyl alcohol because the thing wasn't really all that filthy. There was a bit of crap in the speaker grill, and obviously the button pads were disgusting. But for this, I just used the brush and isopropyl, and it seemed on like a paper towel, and it worked fine. Everything cleaned up nicely. In other projects, I've actually washed them in a sink like you would dishes, but for this, I didn't really think it was necessary. And here we are, the finished project. Unfortunately, while cleaning, I did accidentally break off a bit of plastic from the casing just above the volume knob. This was a very thin piece of metal that sort of just snapped off. So in the future, I might glue that back on, but it's not a huge issue. It's sort of out of the way under the side and you can't really see it. Another thing I would like to do is replace the top plate. the black bit that says Game Boy Advance on it is pretty scratched up. I'm not going to do it for this video, but it would be nice to order that in and replace that because it wouldn't be too much effort to do so. But yes, that is it. Here's me very happily adding it to my collection. I nearly have every single Game Boy. Really the one thing I'm missing right now is the Game Boy Light. I'm still on the lookout for a cheap, broken version of those. So far I've only found one and it was 70 bucks, which is more than I want to spend on this sort of project. But yes, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching and I will catch you in the next one.